So in the last lecture, we discussed the principle of concurrency, and there we discuss different ways uh, to achieve mutual exclusion and synchronization. Now today we'll be starting with the new topic, deadlock. How we can deal with deadlocks is situation which may occur in the system. So before we understand the solution to this problem, we need to understand problem in itself. So again, this is a typo. I guess there is some problem in this. Now, what is deadlock? It's a set of processes. Is deadlock when each process in the set is blocked, awaiting an event that can only be triggered by another block process in the set. So there can be two processes which are in deadlock or more than two processes. So basically, it's a set of processes where every process is blocked and it can be unblocked only when some event occurs, but that event can be again triggered only by some block process in the set, which is not going to possible, right? That's why it is called deadlock. Typically involves process competing for the same set of resources. Normally this happens when there is a set of processes which are competing for the same resources or same set of resources. And the bottom line is no efficient solution. Though we are going to discuss different ways to handle or to tackle this situation, but remember this bottom line, there is no efficient solution. So this is the example of potential deadlock, where every car needs at least two sections of the road to pass through. Like this car 1, it requires A and B, car 2 requires C and B, car 3 requires C and D, and car 4 requires D and A. Now I have used some word called potential deadlock. This is not deadlock. This is not deadlock, because still there is a possibility that if at least two cars, for example 4 and 2, if they do not proceed further and stop at this point, okay, and this 3 and 1, if they proceed further, there won't be any deadlock in the future. There will be easy go through this. Okay, so there is a potential deadlock. Why potential deadlock? If even at this stage none of these cars stops and they continue, so this 2 reaches here, 1 reaches here, 4 reaches here, and 3 will reach here, and this is the deadlock. That none of these cars, can proceed further. So 1 is waiting for 2 to clear this segment, 2 is waiting for 3 to clear this segment, 3 is waiting for 4 to clear this segment, and 4 is waiting for 1 to clear this segment. So there is a set of processes. There is a set of processes which are blocked and waiting for another block process to release some resource, which is not possible. So I hope this helps you to understand the problem. So if you think in this way, processes P and Q, now you can see that process P requires two resources, A and B. And process Q also requires same resources A and B in reverse order, you can say. So for example, process A executes and it gets the resource A. Then process Q, before process A releases or before process P gets this B, process Q runs and it gets the resource B. Now, once process P has acquired A and process Q has acquired B, whatever is the situation, I mean, in whichever order P and Q execute, none of them can complete, because P is waiting for B, which is locked by Q, and if Q runs further, it is waiting for A, which is locked by P. So none of these processes can proceed further. So this is the classical example of deadlock. And this is called joint progress diagram of deadlock. These are the 6 paths. These are the 6 possible paths for these two processes P and Q. Here, these are the processes P and Q. You can see that this is process Q and this is process P. So horizontal progress is the progress of process P, and vertical progress is the progress of process Q. For example, first process P runs up to this point, then Q runs up to this point, then again P runs up to this point. Okay, and now Q runs up to this point. So Q, it completes before P gets any resource. So you can see that progress of Q, it goes from here, it requests B, it gets the B, it requests A, it gets A, it releases B, it releases A, and then after if progress of, and then after if process P runs, there is no problem. So basically here, if any one process completes, starts running and complete before another process start running, then there is no problem in any case. Okay, only if where are the possible problematic cases, that is 3 and 4, where here you can see up to this point process Q runs and it gets B and it locks B, and then P starts and it gets A and it locks A. Now this situation is deadlock situation, because after this, when process Q tries to get A, it won't be able to. After this, if process P try to get B, it won't be able to. So this is a problem, path number 3. Similarly, path 4, reverse order. Process P gets A and then process B Q runs. Process Q gets B, fine. So one of them has got one resource, and now they are waiting for another resource which is blocked by another process. So this is the deadlock inevitable area. So if your process execution of P and Q enters in any of this area, there is a problem, and this is deadlock inevitable. Here the deadlock is fixed. Here that may be a deadlock, there may not be a deadlock, but this is fixed, that deadlock will happen in this area. So this is just for the understanding of this same example. Now if we change the order and this logic little bit of process P and a Q. Process P is a process which gets A, releases A, and then get B and releases B. But process Q is still same. Is there any possibility of deadlock? Now you tell me, is there any possibility of deadlock? No. So this is the joint progress diagram. All 6 paths, you can see that they can complete the P and Q without any problem. So what about this shaded area? Suppose any process enters in this shaded area. Will there be any deadlock? For example, let's say process Q, it gets B, gets A, then process P runs and it tries to get A. And then when it tries to get A, it will be blocked because it is already acquired by Q. Then Q again go further, it will release B, release A, so it will complete, and then P we can complete. So basically there is no possibility of deadlock. There won't be any deadlock if you just change this little logic. Can you see any deadlock here? Possibility of deadlock? Anyone? Okay. So this is some example of deadlock, how it is possible. Now, resource categories. Now there are 2 types of resources, reusable and consumable. So reusable resource can be safely used by one process at a time and is not depleted by that use. It means it is not going to be vanished. A simple example of reusable resource. Can anyone tell me what can be a reusable resource?
Files.
Yes?
Files.
Files, printers like devices, right? Processor, Processor is also reusable resource. So these are the reusable resources. Then there is a consumable resource. It's a resource that can be created and destroyed. Once it is consumed by another process, it is destroyed. Can you give example of consumable resource? Any example of consumable resource? Fine. Interrupts and messages can be consumable resources. Because once interrupt is there, and if another, it is for particular process, if that process gets that interrupt, it identifies the interrupt, then that interrupt is lost. It is not going to last there for long, right? So let us discuss about this reusable resources. So these are some examples of reusable resources: processors, IO channels, main and secondary memory, devices, and data structures like files, databases, and semaphores. These all are reusable resources. Deadlock occurs if each process holds one resource and requests the other. Like get A and B, we just saw that, where you can see that A and B are reusable resources because same resource can be used by more than one process. So that in that case, deadlock occurs if each process holds one resource and then request for the other, which is actually being held by other process. So this is again one example where T is the tape drive and D is the disk file. You can see this. This is how if process P and Q executes step by step. In process P, first step is, or the zero step is, request D resource, then lock D. It means it has got that resource. Then it requests T and got the lock on T, then perform some function and then unlock D and T. And this is Q. Reverse order of locking T and D. So basically this is same as the previous P and Q where A and B resources were there, right? Now, can you give me one sequence of P0 to P6 and Q0 to Q6 where you see the deadlock? In which sequence this, if you find any sequence where deadlock is possible, execution of sequence. Anyone? P0, P1, Q0, Q1, P. Yes, exactly. This is the possible deadlock situation. Now here, let's say space is available for allocation of 200 kilobytes. You have 200 kilobytes available to be allocated. And the following sequence of event occurs. P1 requests 80 kilobytes and after some time it requests 60 kilobytes. P2 requests 70 kilobytes and after some time it requests 80 kilobytes. If any one process executes before any other process, let's say P1 completes first, will there be any problem with this requirement? No. Let's say P2 completes first. Will there be any problem with this requirement? No. So there won't be any deadlock in this case. But what if P1 requires 80 kilobytes? It gets 80 kilobytes. Then P2 executes and it requires 70 kilobytes and it gets 70 kilobytes. Now can P1 and P2 complete after this? No, P2 cannot complete. None of them can complete because total remaining memory is after 80 plus 70, 150, only 50 kilobytes are remaining. And with that 50 kilobytes, none of this process can complete. So this is a deadlock in that case. And if we talk about consumable resource, such as interrupts, signals, messages, and information in IO buffers. IO buffers, let me give you a simple example. When you type something on your screen, let's say your C program, you're running C program, you give some input. Once that input is read by your scanf or read function, can you get it again? Is it available again? Can any other process read that again? Are you getting my question? No, it is not possible, right? Because that input that you provided, it was there in IO buffer, which is read by some process. Now it is no more available there, right? And deadlock may occur if a receive message is blocking message. In case of consumable resource, let us understand, let us take example of consumable resource, which is messages. And we have already seen message passing. And there we have talked about two operations, send and receive. If receive message is blocking, okay, and if you have something like this, P1 is waiting for message from P2 and P2 is waiting for message from P1, and this receive function, it is a blocking call, then this is deadlock. Then this is deadlock because P1 is waiting message from P2 and P2 is waiting for a message from P1, and none of them can go further because after receiving message from other, they will send message to that. So this is not going to work, and this is deadlock. This is like two friends had some fight and they want to initiate talk to each other, but only if someone else, I mean the other one initiates the talk, then I will talk to him, something like that. Both think that way. So it is never going to end. That fight is never going to end. It is like this. This is a deadlock. Now there is a concept called resource allocation graph. So here it is a directed graph. It's a directed graph that depicts a state of the system of resources and processes. Just for your knowledge, there are two types of vertices, process vertice and resource vertice. So process vertice is like circle, resource vertice we are showing it has a square, and this dot within this square represent one instance of that resource. Let's say it's a printer. You may have multiple printers. Let's say you have 3 printers, then there will be 3 dots inside this square. And there are 2 types of edges. If there is an edge from process to resource, it means it's a request edge. P1 is requesting one instance of RA. And if resource is already allocated to some process, then there is an arrow from that particular dot to the process. So that means P1 is holding one instance of RA. So this is the meaning. This is how you read this resource allocation graph, and we will see this. Now, there are few conditions. If these conditions are there, then only you can see deadlock in the system. Otherwise, deadlock is not possible. So what are the necessary and sufficient condition for deadlock? So first we will discuss 3 conditions because of which there is a possibility of deadlock. We are not saying that it confirms the deadlock, but there is a possibility of deadlock because of these 3 conditions, if they are there. First, you restrict that or you impose mutual exclusion. If mutual exclusion is imposed on the system, that is one of the cause, that is one of the reasons why deadlock is possible. Mutual exclusion means at a time only one process can access one resource. So only one process may use a resource at a time. It means resource cannot be used by multiple processes at the same time. But mutual exclusion is something which is required. It is always required in OS so that your resource is always in the correct state. It is not corrupted. But that is one of the reasons for possible deadlock. Hold and wait. A process may hold allocated resources while awaiting assignments of other. If that is applied, that okay, whenever any process wants any other resource, it is already holding some resource and it requires some more resource. So while it is waiting for other resources, it is not going to release whatever resources it has already acquired. That is hold and wait. This is second condition. And the third condition is no preemption. It means no resource can be forcibly removed from a process which is holding it. So if process P1 requires some resource A, which is currently being held by process B, OS cannot forcibly preempt B remove that resource from B and give it to A. That is not allowed. If these are the three conditions, which are there in your system, this will generate a possibility of deadlock. I am not telling that if these three conditions are there, deadlock is final. No, there is a possibility of deadlock because of this. But these are the necessary conditions. These conditions have to be there. Then only there is a possibility of deadlock. Otherwise, deadlock is not possible. But actual deadlock occurs when you have all those three conditions plus circular weight. When you have all those three previous conditions plus circular weight, that is sufficient condition. A closed chain of processes exists such that each process holds at least one resource needed by the next process in the chain. That is called circular weight. So the simple example is this. P1, it is requesting resource RA, but there is only one instance of RA which is already there with P2. P2 required one resource of RB which is already held by P1. This is circular weight. P1 is waiting for RA which is held by P2, and P2 is waiting for RB which is held by P1. So this is circular weight. If that is there and those three conditions are there, that is mutual exclusion, RA cannot be shared, it cannot be used by multiple processes at the same time. P1 which is holding RB, it is not going to release RB while waiting for RA, or P2 is not going to release RA while waiting for RB. That is hold and wait is there. And no preemption. It means if P1 wants RA which is held by P2, OS is not going to remove this RA from P2 and give it to P1. That is also not there. And then you have circular weight. So if all these four conditions are there, then there is a deadlock. So when there is a circular weight in your system and those three conditions are followed by your system, it is imposed in your system, then you can say it is a deadlock. Are you getting up to this? Okay. Is there any deadlock in this? It says that no deadlock, right? It is no deadlock. Can you tell me why? P1 holds RB and it requests RA. P2 holds RA and it requests RB. Because multiple instances of resources are available. Exactly. So there is no wait and hold, right? P1 gets one more resource of RA without any problem, and P2 will get another resource of RB. So there is no deadlock. Now this is the resource allocation graph for that cars at crossroads where deadlock was there. P1, it's a car 1. It holds RA. It is in the section A and requires section B. But B section is already acquired by P2, which requires C. But C section is already acquired by P3 and it requires D. But B section is already acquired by P4 and it requests RA. So you can see this is circular weight. Circular weight need not mean that it is always in circular fashion, right? This is always, you can see this is a circular weight. Are you getting? So how to deal with this deadlock? So three general approaches exist for dealing with deadlock: prevent deadlock, avoid deadlock, and detect deadlock and recover it. Detect deadlock and recover from that. These are the three strategies. Let us talk about the first one, prevent deadlock. Prevent means make sure that deadlock is not going to happen. Okay. There is no possibility of deadlock. Okay. Possibility of deadlock. Why there is a possibility of deadlock? Why there is a possibility of deadlock? In which case you have possibility of deadlock? Anyone? We just discussed actually. Yes. If those four conditions are there, which are the four conditions? Mutual exclusion, hold and wait, no preemption, circular wait. If these four are there, then there is a deadlock. So we want to prevent that deadlock. So what we should do? What do you think? If we want to prevent deadlock, what we need to make sure? Excuse me. What we need to make sure here, if we want to prevent deadlock? Very simple. Design a system in such a way that the possibility of deadlock is excluded. And there are two main methods, indirect and direct. In indirect method, prevent all three of the necessary conditions occurring at once. Make sure that all those three necessary conditions, that is mutual exclusion, hold and wait, and non-preemption. Make sure that all these three conditions do not occur at the same time. Even if at least one condition is not there, then there is a possibility that there won't be deadlock. Then there won't be deadlock. That is the prevention. That is indirect way. And what is direct way? Direct way is to remove the sufficient condition. Make sure that sufficient condition does not occur. And which is the sufficient condition? Circular wait. If there is no circular wait, there is no deadlock. Are you getting this? Yes. So let us see first indirect method, where we need to make sure that none of these three conditions, I mean, not all of these three conditions occur at the same time. So can we get rid of mutual exclusion? Can we avoid? Can we allow our system not to have mutual exclusion? No, we can't allow that. It is must be supported by OS. Mutual exclusion is very important. Otherwise, your resource can be in corrupted state. So you cannot avoid mutual exclusion. It is always there. What about hold and wait? Can I remove this condition? Can I get rid of this condition? Hold and wait. It means hold and wait means what? One process which is holding some resources while waiting for other resources. We do not want this condition to happen. Then what should be the solution? Possible if processes are planned carefully. For an example, require a process request all of its required resources at one time. What it requires to achieve no hold and wait. We do not want to have hold and wait. It means whenever process starts executing, it says that, okay, these are all the resources that I require. Initially, it will tell that and acquire all those resources, and then only it will proceed further. But is it possible for every process to know in advance what resources I will need? Just think, is it possible for all the processes to tell in the advance that these are the resources that I will need in my lifetime? No, it is not possible. So, but process may not know in advance all of the resources that it will require. Even if it knows, let's say by some time, some chance, even if process knows what are the resources that it need during its lifetime, and it acquires all the resources, then only it starts executing. Even if that is there, still it is inefficient. Why? There are two inefficient ways. Process get delayed because before it starts executing, it has to acquire all the resources, and for that it may need to, wait long time before it gets all the resources. It may need to wait for a longer time. So that process will be delayed. That is one problem. Another, let's say process wants two resources, A and B. It has acquired A very quickly. Immediately it has acquired A because it was free. Now this A cannot be given to any other process. And this process which has acquired A, it is waiting for resource B, which it will get after very long time. So what will happen to this resource A? It is wasted because for a long time it is acquired by some process but not being used. But it is not being used. So resources may remain unused for a considerable period. So the way you try to solve this problem, the way you try to avoid this hold and wait, this are the possible solution to avoid hold and wait, but these solutions are very inefficient. These solutions are very inefficient. And then the no preemption. We don't want no preemption. In fact, we want preemption. So if a process holding certain resources is denied a further request, that process must release its original resources and, if necessary, request them again together with the additional resource. Let's say P1 process, it has already acquired A. Now it is asking for B, resource B. But B is busy, so it is denied that you cannot get B right now. So in that case, what process one needs to do? It should release the resource A that it has already acquired and go for waiting state. So basically this is one kind of preemption. Or if they are not releasing it, process 1, it is not releasing its resource A while waiting for B, OS needs to do that forcefully. So another possibility is, if a process requests a resource that is currently held by another process, the OS may preempt the second process and require it to release its resources. This would prevent deadlock only if no two processes possess the same priority. Normally preemption occurs when there is higher priority process. Let's say P1 is already holding resource A, P2 is already holding resource B. Now P1 asks for B. Now P1 asks for B and P2 requires A. That is our classic example, right? Here priority of P1 is higher than P2. So what OS will do? OS will preempt P2 and it will release resource B and give it to P1. Okay. Or if P2's priority is higher, then OS will prevent P1. It will release resource A and give it to P2. But what if both processes are having same priority? OS cannot decide which resource I need to prevent from which process and give it to other. So if they don't have same priority and preemption is allowed, then you can solve this problem. So we have talked about indirect method, but mutual exclusion cannot be removed. You have to have mutual exclusion. Hold and wait, there are few ways to get rid of hold and wait condition, but then they are inefficient ways. Preemption, fine, you can introduce preemption and you can get rid of no preemption, but then make sure that processes don't have same priority, then only it will work. So these are the different cases, these are the different ways to handle these conditions. This is indirect way. Forget about all these three. Even if these three are allowed, mutual exclusion is allowed, hold and wait is allowed, no preemption is allowed. But what if you can somehow make sure that there is no possibility of circular wait? Then there won't be any deadlock. Even if these three conditions are there, deadlock won't be there if there is no circular wait. So can we remove that? So can we get rid of circular wait problem? So what you can do, you can define a linear ordering of resources types. If a process has been allocated resources of type R, then it may subsequently request only those resources of types following R in the ordering. So what it says, let us try to understand. Let's say resource Ri precedes Rj in the ordering. So there are some orders of these resources, R1, R2, R3, R4. Okay. Now, if some process has already ordered R5, let's say some process has acquired R5. Next, that process, same process can request R6, R7 and further, but it cannot request R4, R3, R2, R1. That is linear ordering. If once you have acquired Ri resource, that process can further acquire only Ri plus 1, Ri plus 2, Ri plus 3, but it cannot request Ri minus 1, Ri minus 2 or below that. That is linear ordering. So let's take example. Suppose that two processes A and B are deadlocked because A has acquired Ri and requested Rj, and B has acquired Rj and requested Ri. Is it possible? Is it possible this? I mean, A and B, A already acquired Ri and requested Rj, and B has already acquired Rj and requested Ri. But this is not possible. Why? Because there must be some order of Ri and Rj. I must be less than J or I must be greater than J. So any one of them cannot proceed further because they cannot request that type of resource because of linear ordering. So this condition is not possible, and that's why there won't be deadlock. There won't be a deadlock. Are you getting this? Yes. But this is also very inefficient. How can you stop one process, or how can you impose this kind of ordering on the process request? Okay, you have requested Ri, you cannot further request Ri minus 1 or Ri minus 2. How can you impose that? That is very inefficient. Okay, someone is asking me to explain it again. Let's say P1 process has already requested R4. Okay, and P2 process has already requested R6. P1 further required R6 and P2 further required R4. So P1, which has already got this R4, now it is requesting for R6, which is held by P2, which is already being held by P2. P2 is already, as I told you, P2 is already holding R6, and further it wants R4, which is being held by P1. Is it possible? Can be holding R6 request for R4? According to linear ordering, it is not allowed. So there won't be deadlock because every resource has some linear order. Does this make sense, Samir? So as with hold and wait prevention, circular wait prevention may be inefficient, slowing down processes and denying resource access unnecessary. The same problem is there inefficiently. This is going to handle this problem inefficiently. So basically prevention is not a good solution. Deadlock prevention is not a good solution because the way we have seen, for example, mutual exclusion, you cannot remove that. It has to be there. Second, hold and wait. There are few ways, but they are inefficient. Preemption, you can achieve preemption. You can remove non-preemption, fine. But circular wait, again, there are some ways like linear ordering, but it is inefficient. So all in all, if you see, deadlock prevention is not a good strategy to deal with the deadlock problem. I hope you remember very first slide. What was the bottom line? There is no efficient solution to deadlock. There is no efficient solution to deadlock. That was the bottom line. And prevention, definitely it is not a good solution. Deadlock prevention is not a good strategy to deal with the deadlock. So what is the better one? I mean, let us talk about the other strategy. Deadlock avoidance. Is it a better way? So what is deadlock avoidance? A decision is made dynamically whether the current resource allocation request will, if granted, potentially lead to a deadlock. So at this moment, you check the state of the system. Okay, at particular moment, you have some state of the system. What is state of the system? We will see. State of the system can be represented with different metrics. Okay, different resource metrics. We will see that. At this point, if some requests come, you check if I allow this request, if I grant this request of this resources to particular process, will it potentially lead to a deadlock? You check that. And if that is possible, you won't grant that request, and that is called deadlock avoidance. Does this make sense? Okay, but then how can you check whether this will lead to the potential deadlock? How can you check that? And for that, you require knowledge of future process requests. You require knowledge of request. You require knowledge of about all process requests, that what it requires in future. That knowledge is required. So let us see. There are actually two ways or two approaches to deadlock avoidance. One is process initiation denial. It means do not start a process if it demands might lead to deadlock. If you think that, okay, this process, whatever it requests for, that demand may lead to deadlock, don't start that process. That is process initiation denial. But another approach is do not grant an incremental resource request to that process if this allocation might lead to a deadlock. So rather than not starting process, you allow process to start, but don't grant those requests to that process. Okay, deny that request. That is another approach. And these are the data structures which gives you a state of the system. Okay, so you might have read this and you must have understood this. There is a vector called R, which gives you total amount of resources available of every type. R1 number of printers, R2 number of IO channels, R3 number of memory, something like that. So these are the total number of resources of every type, R1 to Rm, that is resource vector. Then you have available vector. We call it V. Available vector. That okay, of every type of resource, how many amounts or how many instances of that resource are available. Okay. There is a claim matrix. It says that for process 1, for each type of resource, what is the claim? What is the requirement? So Cij is the requirement of process I for resource J. So C12 is the requirement of process 1 for resource type 2. Easy to understand? Is it easy to understand this matrix? Yes, guys. Then there is allocation matrix. Aij is nothing but the current allocation to process I of resource J. Okay, that is currently allocated resources. So let us try to understand. There is some relation between this matrix and vectors, and it is very simple to understand. Rj represent total amount of resource J in the system. Rj is the total amount of resource J in the system, which is always equal to available resource of J, available resource for type J plus all the allocated resource J to different processes. All the allocation of resource J to all the processes. And this must be true for all J type of resources, all types of resources. So either resource is available or it is allocated. There is no other possibility. Then claim is always less than or equal to the amount of actual available resources, actual number of resources. You take any claim of process J, and you take any claim of resource J from any process Ci, from any process Pi, you take any claim of resource J, it must be less than or equal to Rj. And allocation of resource J to any process I must be less than or equal to its claim. So no process can be allocated resources more than its claim. Claim is requirement. Claim is the requirement. Are you getting this relation and this data structures? Because this is very very much needed that you understand this data structure so that you can understand the further algorithm. Now, first approach, process initiation denial. It means a process is only started if the maximum claim of all current processes plus those of the new processes can be met. Let's say there are P1 to P5 processes are already there, and whatever is the maximum claim plus the new process that you want to start, you add its maximum claim in the current process's claim, and if that summation is still, if it is still less than or equal to the maximum amount of resources available, then only you allow that process to start. Very simple example, if there are two processes already there in the system, P1 and P2 are there in the system. P1 requires one instance of printer, P2 requires one instance of printer, and P3 wants to start, which also requires one instance of printer. If you have 3 or more than 3 printers in your system, then only allow P3, otherwise don't allow P3. Are you getting? Start a new process Pn plus 1 only if number of resources of type J is greater than or equal to claim by that n plus 1 for J plus all the claims of processes 1 to n for J. And if that is applicable for all J resources, then only you allow that process to start. Otherwise, don't allow that process to start. And this is not optimal. Anyway, this idea is not optimal. Because P1 and P2 who require one printer, and P3 also going to require one more printer. Let's say you have only one printer. Let us say you have only one printer. Don't you think that all these 3 processes can be completed with the help of one printer? Sorry. What do you say? If you have only one printer, can you complete all these 3 processes? Right. So when you use this idea, when you deny that process to be started, this is not optimal solution. And you assume the worst, that all processes will make their maximum claims together. Sometimes, let's say you have 7 instances of particular resource. Let's say you have 7 instances of particular resource. P1 needs 5 of those resource, 5 instances of those resource. P2 needs 4 instances of those resource. What do you think? You can't complete this P1 and P2 with 7 instances of that resource, because combinedly they require 9. Combinedly they require 9. So you won't allow P2 to start because P1 is already holding 5 instances. Now there are only 2 instances left. P2 wants to start because it requires 4 instances and there are no more 4 instances left. You don't allow P2. Is it worth? Is it optimal? Because at some point P1 is going to release some of the amounts of that resource. Some of the instances of that resource will be released and P2 can utilize that. So this idea is very suboptimal or non-optimal, you can say. So what is optimal or what is better than this? That is resource allocation denial. You allow process to start, but you don't allow that resources. You don't grant those resources to that process at that time. After some time, if resources are free, you can allow. You can grant those resources to that process. So this algorithm is a better approach than the previous approach, and it is called Banker's algorithm. This is called Banker's algorithm, and this is very important by GATE perspective also, GATE exam perspective, this algorithm. Sometimes questions are asked based on this algorithm. In fact, this chapter, the whole chapter is very important by GATE perspective. And this Banker's algorithm is a strategy of resource allocation denial. So consider a system with fixed number of resources. State of the system is the current allocation of resources to the process. What is state of the system? It is the current allocation of resources to process. There is a safe state. Safe state is where there is at least one sequence that does not result in deadlock. At least one sequence that does not result in deadlock. Then it is called safe state. And unsafe state is a state that is not safe. So let us understand what is state, what is unsafe state, what is safe state. Let's say a system consisting of 4 processes and 3 resources. There are 4 processes, 3 resources. This is claim matrix. That means during its life, P1 requires 3 units of R1, 2 units of R2, and 2 units of R3 during its life, the whole life. But when, how many units will be required, that is not mentioned here. But during the whole life, it requires only this many resources. P2 requires 6 units of R1, 1 unit of R2, and 3 units of R3. And same for P3 and P4. Then this is allocation matrix, current state. This is the current state of your process. How many resources are allocated to every process of different types. So currently P1 is allocated 1 unit of R1, no unit of R2 and R3. Currently P2 is allocated 6 unit of R1 and no unit 1 unit of R2 and 2 unit of R3. Same for P3 and P4. So now you need to find out need matrix. This is sometimes called need matrix. What is still left? What is the need of each process? So it is already have this requirement. This is already allocated. So what is still left to be allocated? What is still it requires? So P1 required 3, it is allocated 1. So it still required 2 units of R1. P1 required 2 units of R2, it is allocated 0. So still it requires R2. 2 minus 0, 2. And same way for P2, P3 and P4. So this is C minus A, still required. Or the need matrix. And this is the R vector. Total number of units of R1 are 9, total number of units of R2 are 3, and total number of R3 are 6. So if you see that this is currently allocated, if this is current allocation of R1, R2 and R3 for 2 different processes, you can see 1 plus 6 plus 2, total 9 R1 units are allocated. And there are only 9 units. So how much left? How many R1 units are left? 0. No R1 units are available now. All 9 units are already allocated. Same for R2. 2 are allocated. There are total 3. So only 1 is left. 5 of R3 are allocated. There are only 6. So only 1 is left. Are you getting this? Yes, this is very important that you understand this data structure. Now the question is this a safe state? Sorry. Is this a safe state? So what is safe state? What is safe state? Safe state is where there is at least one sequence that does not result in deadlock. It means this is the current situation. Can we proceed further from this stage with this many available resources so that you can complete all these processes in any particular order? So someone has answered. We can give R3 to P2 and gets its resource after execution. Correct. So now this is the current need. This is currently required need matrix, right? So what is possibility? With this available resources, is there any process which can be completed? With this available resources now, is there any process which can be completed? P2, yes. P2 can be completed. And if P2 gets completed, what will be the available resources after P2 gets completed? How this available vector will be changed? Exactly, it will become 6, 2, 3 because already R1 unit, 6 R1 unit was allocated to P1, P2, that will be free. So this will become 6, 1 plus 1, 2, and 2 plus 1, 3. So 6, 2, 3. So P2 can be completed. Fine. So once P2 is completed, can any other process be completed after that? So this is the current state now. This is current state. Can you complete any other process with this? Yes, in fact, any process out of P1, P3, and P4, you can complete any process with these resources. So you take any order that will be completed. Are you getting this? So after P1, now let's say here we are taking P1. So after P1 is completed, tell me what will be the available resources. After P1 gets completed, what will be the available resources? 7, 2, 3. Whatever is the currently available plus whatever was allocated to that completed process. So 6 plus 1, 7, 2 plus 0, 2, 3 plus 0, 3. Then you may go for P3. Let's say if we go in the order, then you may go for P3. I guess that is how we do it. So if P3 gets completed, what will be the available vector? After this P3 completed, what will be the available vector? 9, 3, 4, correct. And then you can complete P4. So once P4 will be completed, what will be the available vector? 9, 3, 6, exactly. Are you getting this? So this is one possible sequence of process execution, which is going to make sure that all processes will be completed. And that is why this state is a safe state, because from this onwards, there is at least one sequence of execution which will allow all these 4 processes to complete. That is why this is safe state. Let us talk about unsafe state. Just assume that this is one initial state. Currently, this is your state. You have 1, 1, 2 units left, and this is the C minus A. This is the C minus A. Okay. Let's say in this case, let me ask you one question. Suppose P2 makes a request, P2 process, it makes a request for one additional unit of R1 and one additional unit of R3, because this is the left requirement, right? But currently P2 requires 1 unit of R1, and out of this 2, it still currently it requires only 1 more unit of R3. Try to understand. This is the need of the P2 for the completion, right? But currently at this stage, P2 asks for 1 unit of R1 and 1 unit of R3. If that is the request, should this request be granted? Suppose you grant this request. Suppose you grant this request. So what this will become? If you grant this request, 1 unit of R1, so this will become 6, this will become 0. This will become 2 and this will become 1. This will become 1. This will become 0. This is still 0. So 0, 0, 1. And here it will be 6, 1, 2. Okay. What will be here? 0, 1, 1. Correct. So now with this 0, 1, 1 and this with 0, 0, 1, with this 0, 0, 1, is this a safe state? If you actually see, if you allow this request where P2 asks for 1 unit of R1 and 1 unit of R3, and if you allow that, you will reach to this, you will go back to this state actually. You will be at this state. Is this a safe state? Is this a safe state? We have already discussed that this is a safe state, right? Because from here, there is at least one sequence of execution by which all processes can be completed. So at this point, if P2 requests 1 unit of R1 and 1 unit of R3, and if you allow that, your system still will be in the safe state. But what if, let's say, instead of that, if at this point, P1 makes the request for 1 additional unit of R1 and R3. Now P1 requests 1 unit of R1 and 1 unit of R3. So how this will be changed? P1 makes 1 unit of R1, need 1 unit of R1 and 1 unit of R3. So this will become 0, 1, 1. This will become 0, 1, 1. Still available resources will remain same, but this state will be 1, 2, 1, 1, 0, 2, 1, 0, 3, 4, 2, 0. Now, if you will reach to this state, is this a safe state? Is this a safe state? Yes or no? Can you have any one sequence of execution which allows all these processes to be completed? Okay, can you see any process which can be completed with this available resources? No, because there is not enough available resources to complete any of this process. R3 is only 1. It means only P1 or P4 can be allowed. But then P1 requires 1 unit of R1, which is not available. P4 requires 4 unit of R1, which is not available. So none of this process can proceed further. And this is that unsafe state. So you cannot allow at this point, you cannot allow P1 to request 1 unit of R1 and 1 unit of R3. If you allow, then you reach to the unsafe state. Then you reach to the unsafe state. Now, the point is, whether state is safe or unsafe, it is just the assumption. It is not reflecting the actual thing, but that is the potential problem. It is the possibility that deadlock can be there. Suppose at this state also, when we call this unsafe state, when we call this as unsafe state, but there is one possibility that if while these processes are running, some of that process may not need any resource further at the same time, and they can complete, or they can, before they can acquire other resource, they releases whatever resources are already there. Meanwhile, they request another resources. Let's say, for example, P1. Before this P1 goes for this request, it also releases some of the resources, so that it will take other resources later on. So meanwhile, P1 may release some resources, and through which you can complete another process. So that is one possibility. That is why when we say it's a safe state or unsafe state, when we say unsafe state, it means it is the possibility that from this state onwards there can be a deadlock. There can be a deadlock. It is not guaranteed that deadlock will be there. I hope you are getting this idea. So what is deadlock avoidance? When a process makes a request for a set of resources, assume that the request is granted, update the system state accordingly, then determine if the result is a safe state or not. Okay, see, this is deadlock avoidance algorithm. When a process makes a request for a set of resources, assume that the request is granted, update the system state accordingly, then determine if the result is a safe state or not. If it is safe state, grant the request. Instead of assume, actually grant the request. And if it is not safe state, block the process until it is safe to grant the request. So this is deadlock avoidance logic. This is deadlock avoidance logic, which has this data structures: resource vector, available vector, claim matrix, allocation matrix. These are the same things that we have already discussed. And what is the logic? Resource allocation algorithm. If allocation to the process I of any resources, or for all type of resources, so whatever resources of all types are allocated to process I plus its request for all types of resources, if it is greater than its claim, then it is an error. Else, if request of all resources are greater than the available vector, then also it is an error. Suspend that process. Otherwise, define new state, that is assumption. You assume that you grant that request. So it means allocation will be increased like this. Allocation plus request, that will be the new allocation, and check whatever is left in available. Okay, this is how you define new state. If this newly defined state is safe, then carry out allocation. Otherwise, reverse. If state is not safe, restore the original state by reversing this thing and suspend that process. And how to find safe state? So this is the algorithm for that. You just go through this, you will get it. Safe state idea. Okay. Okay, let us discuss this. What is safe state here? How you find out whether state is safe or not? So this is the algorithm for that. So here, when you say that, find out whether it is safe or not. So state S is there. Now you check, you have this currently available. Then how many requests are still left for that process? That is, rest is number of processes. Currently available equal to available. Okay, whatever is available, that you say it is currently available, and rest is equal to all processes. Currently all processes are still left. Now let us see here. While possible, so possible is true, it's an infinite loop, you can say, until unless you make it false. So what you do here inside this loop, find a process pk in rest. It means whatever processes are still left to be completed, Find one process in those set of processes such that claim of that process for all resources minus allocation of that process for all resources is less than or equal to currently available. It is very simple. It is very simple. With this, not this, let us take this example. What we did, we try to find which C minus A is less than V. So we found that P2's C minus A is less than V. That is what exactly we are doing here. This is C minus A less than V. So find such one process. If you can find at least one such process, then increment the available. Just assume that that PK is completed. So whatever is previously allocated to that you add into the currently available. So your current available will be increased and your rest will be removed. PK will be removed from the processes which are still left to be completed. And then you continue. So after P2, we found that P1 can be completed. Then we found that P3 can be completed. Then we found that P4 can be completed. And at the end, there won't be any processes left. But if you, at any particular stage, if you don't find any process which can be completed, then you say possible equal to false. And then you return result rest equal to null. So if rest equal to null, it means all processes can be completed. So it's a safe state. If rest equal to null, you are returning true. It means it's a safe state. But if it is not null, it means it is false. It means it is not a safe state. It is unsafe state. I hope you are getting this logic, this algorithm. It is a very simple idea. Now it is in the form of syntax. That's it. Otherwise, idea is very simple. Are you getting? Let me know. Are you getting yes or no? Okay. So this is deadlock avoidance. Now, whatever is left in this chapter that we will try to complete in the next lecture, that is deadlock avoidance. Pluses, minuses, what are the advantages, what are the disadvantages, and then deadlock detection and recovery. And then we will discuss Dining philosopher problem. So we'll try to complete the remaining part of this chapter in the next lecture. Okay.